Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something with you. How many times you think about when you go through these cities and towns, for those of you who travel, and how you can see some of these little cities or communities within a city that are so pristine. They're so suave and so manicured and so cared for that they are gated up. They call them gated communities, and they represent one side of the railroad track. On the other side of the railroad track, what you mostly see are ghettos, dilapidation, houses that falling apart, unlivable. I mean, just stressed out. And you think about, what does this represent? This represents those who have had privilege in this society. Wherever the fruits were coming from, they had access to it. The other side of the railroad track, they were treated as second-class citizens. Hey, in fact, they weren't even treated as full human beings. They were called 3/5 human. And all rules, regulations, policies, everything that was designed reflects this. So you got one side with privilege, the other side no privilege. One is a gated community, other is a ghetto. And then something happens, something uniquely happens. There is an international movie that takes place. And what it does, ladies and gentlemen, is it's a documentary of the governments and the existence of life on the planet where human beings live. And what it showed was that wherever human beings live, they got a form of government. And that form of government seems to be represented by races for some reason or another. You got white people sometimes, you got black people in other places, you got other shades of people in other places. And they represent all kinds of names and that you've given them. But it's all representative of the rule of man. And what this rule of man in this movie, in this documentary, the powers that be were cruel, absolutely cruel. What they would allow to happen was for oppression and abuse to take place. And that was represented through that little incident that took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the murder, the public execution by the governments of the world being depicted by some power that we don't see, brought this to our attention. And it was choking the life out of a man who was suffering, who represents the suffering all over the world of people under the governments of men. And all of the people that were standing around taking pictures and encouraging and the cops to stop, the powers that be to stop exerting itself in such a way that it was exhausting this man of his life. But whatever they did, it was not sufficient enough to save that man's life. It represented through this documentary all of the pain and suffering all over the world that's caused by the governments that you are under, and all of the things that you're trying to do to stop it is not stopping it. And if you keep on relying on it, you're going to die, just like George Floyd. You got another option. You can change and try the government of God. See, there are not but two governments. There's the government of God and the government of man. A lot of you call it the devil, but you don't know anything about the devil. But you do know the world exists, and you know that you exist. And the world works right around real smooth, so you say that's good. You just take out one Jesus and make it God. That we had nothing to do with. And so, when we start looking at ourselves, we are here by the same process that the trees are here, but the trees grow in harmony. The flowers, everything that's natural just grows in harmony, but we have choice. Because we can do one thing or we can do another thing. And there are certain things that if we do will cause us to be privileged all across the board. And there are other things that we do that will cause us to have one side of privilege and another side that is not. So when we have this movie, the movie says, now this power have shown us, human beings, what's actually going on. And it requires of us to respond. What are we going to do? I look at it, ladies and gentlemen, as an expression of Judgment Day. You know the hell that we're in. Somebody has made it possible. Somehow, we now all across the globe know it. And so what are we going to do? It has shown us that everything that's ever been tried, the stuff that we are doing right now that's been happening since George Floyd died, is nothing but a repeat of failure already. And if that's all you got to do, then listen to somebody you don't want to listen to. Listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, a man who have, just like you, have fallen short of the glory of God but lifted back up. A man who wants life but seems like all he's going through is hell. And this hell is because he has recognized through some revelation that the problem in our society, we are the problem, the people, and we can fix it. But nobody wants to listen. Now you've been given a demonstration. What are you going to do? Black people, people of color, all of the human race who don't want to have anything to do with this, Eddie Marcus represents the government of God. Now, there might be some other people who are saying it too. They, the world does everything it possibly can to keep us from being heard. No. So right now, it's almost like, I know I'm not the only one talking this talk, but I haven't heard of another talking this talk that's running for public office that want to expand this talk beyond talk and make it a reality in our lives. So I'm asking the people to consider this, and hopefully you'll decide to go for the government of God and go to those polls in November and write in Eddie Marcus as the next president of the United States, and let these that man's government know you ain't being fooled this time. They got you once, they got you a whole bunch of times, but they ain't getting you this time. I mean, they said, they try to confuse you, make you think what you saw is not what you saw, and what you heard is not what you heard. But when it got all over the world, and the whole world saw it, and the whole world responded the same, you can't trick us no more. We got that message. Yes, we did. And we're going to respond accordingly. Thank you very much. Wow.